This is task 2C part 4, which is the test plan. In this task you're asked to produce a test plan for the spreadsheet. Now a test plan is all about a document that you'll give to somebody in the future and say, right, this is what the spreadsheet should do. Could you run through this test plan and see whether it does actually do it? So you're being asked to complete the test plan to show how 3 different formulae in the spreadsheet could be tested. First of all, this is the test plan that you're going to use. So don't use any type of different layout. It must be that specific layout. So this is the exact layout that you were given before. Let's make that a little bit bigger for us. So in here we're going to have our test numbers. We're going to have 3 test numbers. 1, 2, 3. We're only asked for 3 tests. There's no point putting any more because they won't mark anymore. Our type of tests. It asks you to test formulae. You can have valid, invalid or extreme tests. There's no point doing invalid or extreme when we're testing formulae. It all has to be valid data because we're looking at the results of the actual formulae itself. So those will all be valid. Now we've got to decide which formulae we're going to test. Now it says they've got to be different formulae. So what is meant by different? Well, it doesn't really apply in this case because every formula and function that we're using throughout our model is different to other ones that we've got. It would be if you'd got replicated formulae going down the spreadsheet. So we don't really need to worry about what different is as long as it's something that hasn't been tested before. So for example, we couldn't test the number of days twice. We could only test that once. So what we're going to do, we need to identify what we're going to test, and the best thing to do is look at which of the simplest formulae that we can test with the simplest input values and the simplest expected output values. So let's have a look at the number of days because that really is a simple one. So we're going to go for a number of days. We already know that we're putting in valid data. But what are our input values? Well, the number of days depends on the date of hire and the date of return. So let's say we take a date of hire, and I'm going to go for the 15th of the 12th 2016. But we also need a date of return, and I think we'll go for this as the 18th of the 12th 2016. We now need to have an expected output value. What would we expect? Well, that would be 15, 16, 17, 18. So that would be 4 days because remember it's supposed to be inclusive. So we would expect the answer to be 4. Now, this is far from satisfactory at the moment. First of all, we need to identify which worksheet we're going to be using. So I'm going to put here that all of this is on the quote worksheet. And same here, but what is 4 going to be? Well, that's the number of days, so we need to identify what it will be. Number of days equals 4, and we'll say again that that is on the quote worksheet. We cannot assume that the tester will know which worksheet is being used. You won't get the marks if you don't say which worksheet, particularly when you've used more than one worksheet, so we do need to actually make that very clear. Let's have a look at another one that's quite straightforward, and that's the expiry date. Now, I say it's straightforward, it is nearly straightforward. The difficulty we've got here is choosing an exact value. Because the expiry date can only be calculated on the day that the tester uses it, it's very difficult to say what the exact value will be. So what we're going to do in this case is use an example. So I'm going to put the current date, that is the value that will be used, but to cover my back, I'm going to say, for example, if today is 13th of the 9th of 16. Okay, and again, we need to say which worksheet it's going to be on. So we'll say it's on the quote worksheet. So what would we expect? Well, we would expect the quote expiry date to be 7 days later. Now again, that isn't normally satisfactory, but because we don't know what the current date is that the tester will be testing on, it's difficult to say. So again, we'll put an example. For example, if we had the 13th of September, then we would expect the 20th of September 2016 on the quote worksheet. So that covers us in that situation. Let's have another look at another one that doesn't rely on much input data. That's the minimum driver age. We don't have to have working formulae for this. Our formulae do not need to work. We can run a test plan without having working formulae. So we're going to test the minimum driver age. Now the input to this is going to be the youngest driver age here. Sorry, it won't be, it will be the vehicle. Right? Because based on the vehicle we will then be able to work out what the minimum driver age is. So we're going to say here that vehicle equals, well, let's go for estate, as that's the one that we've got there. Vehicle equals estate on the quote worksheet again. Don't forget that bit, it's really important. So if we have a look, what would we expect the minimum driver age to be for an estate car? We would expect it to be 21. You know, I don't need any formulas to be able to do that test plan. So I'm going to say here that the minimum driver age equals 21. And again, it's on the quote worksheet. It's not on the vehicle rates worksheet because that's where we're looking at the data from. It's actually here that we want the data to appear. So this is a complete test plan. It includes all valid data. They're all formulae. They're all different formulae and functions. We've identified the worksheet for every input and output, and we've identified specific values. Now, it is possible that instead of date of hire, I could put C10, and instead of date of return, I could put C12, and instead of a number of days, I could say specifically what it would be, which is F16 over here. That's absolutely fine. You can do that, or you can just use descriptions. The reason descriptions are acceptable is because a test plan is normally done during a design stage where the cell references would not be known in advance. And so it wouldn't be normal to use cell references, but cell references are acceptable, named cells are acceptable, or a description of where that data will be is also acceptable. Just to show you that some things where this could go very complicated. If you went for trying to do the total quote, imagine how many inputs there are. Now yes, you could specify the hire rate and you could specify the additional driver's amount, but they're not really inputs. So in order to do that, you've got to have quite a lot of input. You're going to have date of hire, date of return, the depot, the vehicle. You're going to need to know the number of accidents. You're going to need to know the conviction points and the number of drivers. There's a lot of inputs that would be needed to test that. So try and keep to formulae and functions that don't require a lot of inputs, and you should be fine. What you want to do with this is you definitely want to practice this in a similar but different scenario and get your teacher to look at it and assess it and see where you might be making mistakes before you do the real coursework, because it's very easy to miss out little things on here. Good luck.